He stood as a symbol of British music for decades. Yet in the final chapter, he walks alone. Is there any pain more agonizing than that? Cliff Richard, the man who once silenced entire arenas with nothing more than a trembling note, the voice behind immortal songs, like Living Doll, We Don't Talk Anymore, and Miss Unites, melodies that became memories for generations. But behind every standing ovation lived a silence no one heard. Behind the perfectly measured smile were years of quiet loneliness. Behind the image of a man untouched by scandal was a heart that endured wounds few ever saw. The pressure of being treated like an untouchable monument. The cruelty of unreasonable accusations. The humiliation of public mockery by those who insisted they knew his private life better than he did. All of it followed him like a shadow across an entire career. Now, at 85, even with a fortune worth tens of millions, Cliff Richard faces his most difficult chapter, yet one shaped not by noise, but by solitude. Before the legend, before the applause, before the name that would echo through music history, he was just a frightened little boy in a collapsing world. He was born Harry Roger Webb in 1940 in Lucknow, British India. During a time when empires were cracking beneath their own weight, the imperial flag still flew, but the foundations were already breaking. His family appeared orderly from the outside: rituals, uniforms, shared meals, but beneath the surface, silence stretched longer than words. Children sense these things before they understand them. The sadness hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. In 1948, history changed everything. India gained independence. For millions, it meant freedom. For the Webb family, it meant exile. They packed what little they owned and left quietly, not returning home, but arriving in a place that only existed on paper. Cliff later recalled, they were so poor they didn't even have 2 pennies to live on. England was cold, gray, unforgiving. Post-war Britain offered ration books, cracked walls, and rooms so small the cold seemed permanent. In a cramped flat in Surrey, spiderwebs shared the walls with the family. There was no heating, no comfort. At night, Cliff heard his mother crying softly in the kitchen. His father, once respected in India, now came home smelling of rain and defeat. The boy who once played beneath warm skies learned that silence is sometimes the kindest way adults protect one another. Years later, Cliff would say, "That was when I learned growing up doesn't always come with light." Then music arrived. American rock and roll wasn't just sound, it was oxygen. Elvis Presley, Buddy Holly, Little Richard. Their voices opened, a door to somewhere larger than the walls closing in around him. Cliff knew instantly what he had to do. He wanted to stand on a stage. He wanted others to feel what music had awakened inside him. At school, he was overlooked. Tall, shy, soft. University was impossible. A factory job waited like a dead end. Music was the only voice whispering something different. At 17, Harry disappeared. Cliff Richard was born. The name was Armor, Clifflick, and Unbreakable Rock. Richard, in tribute to Little Richard's fire. It wasn't branding. It was survival. When Move It was recorded, it was nearly discarded as a B-side. Too raw, too wild. But one man heard its power. Jack Good demanded it be pushed to the front. When Cliff performed it on Oh Boy, British culture cracked open. The song Britain had its first true rock and roll star. From that moment on, he never escaped the spotlight. The hits followed relentlessly. Living Doll, The Young Ones, Summer Holiday. Songs that filled the emotional void of a post-war nation desperate to believe tomorrow could be kinder than yesterday. While others faded, Cliff endured even. When the Beatles arrived and changed everything. In 1964, he still had more top 10 hits than they did. Lennon and McCartney later admitted it was Cliff who opened the door. But something inside him shifted. The height of fame, he made an unfashionable choice. He publicly devoted himself to his Christian faith, not for image, not for strategy, but because he could no longer pretend. The price was immediate. Audiences thinned. The press questioned his relevance. Cliff later admitted he didn't know who he was anymore on stage or off, yet he refused to stop. His music grew deeper, darker, more honest. Miss Unites and Devil Woman were not just songs, they were confessions. When Devil Woman hit the U.S. top 10, it marked not a comeback, but a rebirth. Critics were forced to reconsider. Respect replaced nostalgia. But through it all, one burden remained unspoken, while cheering crowds roared by day. Cliff sat alone by night, praying his father would still be alive when the show ended. He wasn't. His father died before witnessing his son's greatest successes. Cliff carried the guilt for the rest of his life. "I should have been with him," he said quietly. "My career took that from me." That loss changed the way he stood on stage forever. Then came the silence. Of the mid-1970s, no charts, no radio calls, no headlines. For a man who clung to music as his lifeline, it felt like suffocation. But once again, he refused to disappear. We Don't Talk Anymore arrived like a sigh turned into melody. Mistletoe and wine reshaped Christmas itself. At Wembley in 1989, Cliff didn't perform, he confessed. Song by song, decade by decade. Behind the lights, loneliness endured. His unspoken love for Olivia Newton-John lasted half a century. Never scandalous. Never claimed. When she died, Cliff said only, she didn't die. She just stopped living. His romances followed the same pattern, beautiful, unfinished. Fame demanded sacrifice, and Cliff paid in silence. He never married, never had children. When rumors followed him, he responded once, "If I were gay, would it matter?" and said, "Nothing more." Then, in his 70s, came the cruelest blow. In 2014, his home was raided based on an anonymous allegation. No charges, no accuser. Yet, a BBC helicopter filmed it live. His dignity was stripped in real time. For nearly 2 years, Cliff lived suspended in fear. He lost weight, he fell ill. "They stole my joy," he said. When cleared, he did not disappear. He fought back and won. The court ruled the BBC had violated his privacy, but the scars remained. Today, Cliff lives quietly between Barbados and Portugal. His wealth is vast, but his life is modest. His philanthropy speaks louder than his possessions. He still moves, still sings, still walks forward. At 85, he continues, not because he must, but because music remains his breath. Cliff Richard's life is not a fairy tale. It is a study in endurance. A man who survived exile, loss, silence, betrayal, and loneliness, yet never allowed bitterness to define him. In the end, his greatest legacy is not fame. It is resilience, lived quietly, with grace.